Lila's grandmother always told her one thing: never stray too far from the path, child. There are places the world forgot for a reason. Growing up, Lila had laughed at her grandmother's superstitions. She was a woman of logic, of modernity, and there was no place for old folk tales in her life. But now, standing alone in the dense, suffocating mist of an ancient forest, those words echoed in her mind like an eerie chant. Her heart raced as she looked at the scene in front of her. A village that shouldn't be there. Lila had always been an adventurer. She thrived on the unknown, the thrill of getting lost, and the rush of finding her way back. That's why she'd eagerly agreed to go hiking with her college friends. It was meant to be a weekend of exploration, of nature, of escaping the stress of their last semester of university. They had set out early, laughing and carefree, following trails that meandered through the lush wilderness of the mountains. But Lila's curiosity, as usual, had gotten the better of her. When she spotted an overgrown path, barely visible through the brambles, she couldn't resist the temptation. It wasn't on the map, and her friends had warned her not to stray too far. She had waved them off, promising she would be back before they even noticed she was gone. That had been hours ago. Now, standing in front of the village, a deep unease settled in her stomach. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows that twisted through the trees, making the landscape feel alien. The village seemed out of place in the modern world, ancient, untouched, as if it had been forgotten for centuries. The houses were made of stone, their roofs sagging with age, moss crawling up their walls. Windows were dark, like empty eye sockets, peering out into the fog. There were no signs of life, no people, no animals, not even a stray breeze to stir the overgrown grass. It was unnervingly quiet. Lila swallowed hard, her throat dry as she stepped forward, the weight of silence pressing down on her. Her hiking boots crunched against the gravel path as she moved toward the village square. In the center, a stone well stood, its edges crumbling with age. She paused, glancing around, hoping to see something, anything, that would explain this place. "Hello?" she called out, her voice wavering in the still air. The silence swallowed her words. No one answered. As she turned to leave, to find her way back to her friends, something caught her eye. A figure standing at the far end of the square. For a moment, hope flared in her chest. Maybe someone did live here after all. But as she approached, her hope quickly turned to dread. It wasn't a person, it was a statue, a girl, about her age, frozen in stone. Her face was twisted in terror, her hands raised as if to shield herself from something unseen. The detail was unnerving, every strand of hair, every crease in her clothing, perfectly captured. Lila took a step back, her pulse quickening. There was something deeply wrong about this place. Suddenly, a whisper brushed against her ear, faint and indistinct, like the wind carrying a distant voice. "Turn back!" Lila spun around, but there was no one there. Just the empty village, the crumbling houses, and the thick fog that seemed to close in around her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she glanced back at the statue. The girl's eyes, wide with fear, seemed to bore into her. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Turn back." Lila's breath caught in her throat as she felt the air around her grow cold. The mist seemed to thicken, swirling at her feet, twisting in unnatural patterns. The village, which had seemed so still and lifeless moments ago, now felt alive with unseen eyes, watching her every move. Panic gripped her as she stumbled backward, her mind screaming at her to leave, to get out of this place before it was too late. She turned and ran, her feet pounding against the cobblestone streets as she sprinted toward the forest's edge. But no matter how far she ran, the village seemed to follow her. The trees, once familiar and inviting, now loomed like dark sentinels, their branches twisted and gnarled, clawing at the sky. The path she had come from was gone, swallowed by the fog, and the village was still there, just behind her, always in view. Breathless and terrified, Lila stopped, her legs trembling beneath her. She was trapped. There was no way out. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices surrounding her, overlapping and indistinct, yet all saying the same thing. "Turn back!" Desperation clawed at her as she stumbled into the village square once again. The stone well loomed in front of her, its dark mouth yawning like the entrance to some forgotten underworld. The statue of the girl stood nearby, her expression frozen in eternal fear. Lila's mind raced. She didn't understand what was happening, didn't know why she couldn't leave, but she knew, with a sickening certainty, that something was very, very wrong with this village. She approached the well, her hands trembling as she peered into its depths. The water at the bottom was still, so still it reflected her face back at her. Only, it wasn't her face. The reflection in the water was older, gaunt, and hollow-eyed. It stared back at her with a look of sorrow and despair. A scream bubbled up in her throat, but before she could make a sound, the ground beneath her feet began to crack. The cobblestones shifted, splitting open as if the earth itself was tearing apart. From the well, a deep, guttural moan echoed up, filling the air with a sound that seemed to come from the bowels of the earth. The shadows that had been lurking at the edges of the village surged forward, swirling around her like a living entity. They wrapped around her body, cold and suffocating, pulling her down toward the cracked earth. Lila fought against them, her hands clawing at the ground as she tried to pull herself free, but it was no use. The shadows were too strong, too powerful. As they dragged her toward the well, her gaze locked onto the statue of the girl. The stone eyes, wide with terror, seemed to watch her, as if the girl knew exactly what was about to happen. In her final moments, as the shadows closed in and the village swallowed her whole, Lila understood. This village was not abandoned. It had never been abandoned. It was waiting, and now it had claimed her, just as it had claimed the others before her. When Lila's friends came looking for her the next morning, they found nothing but the empty village, shrouded in mist and silence. There was no sign of struggle, no footprints, no clues. Just the eerie stillness of a place that time had forgotten. But as they stood in the village square, something caught their eye. A statue, standing next to the well. A statue of a girl, frozen in stone, her face twisted in terror. And beside her, another statue, a new one. It was Lila. The village whispered its promise, the wind carrying the sound of voices long forgotten. It would wait for the next.